Okay, hi everybody, and welcome to this edition of Ask a New York City Tour Guide. Yep, it's another quarantine edition from my backyard. I was initially going to give a tour of my backyard, but it's looking a little rough and it's been really wet, so I'm going to wait for things to look a little bit better. But apparently somebody's mowing in the background in another yard, so soon, hopefully. And someone has a garden, so we'll be able to see what they're planting. Now, how can you help? I had a few things last week. This week, let's concentrate on people who are out of work. So, the Restaurant Workers Community Foundation, all of our restaurants are closed down except for those that can do delivery. All of the bartenders I know, most of the food workers I know are all out of work. So we've got the Restaurant Workers Community Foundation. You can actually donate and help out people who are out of work and who may not be eligible for full unemployment. Actors, every single solitary production, both in theater and in television and film, is shut down. So actors need some work, and I know a lot of out-of-work actors. So the Artist Relief Tree, you actually give money and they distribute it, and it kind of goes from there. Their information is below. We also got First Responders First, and this you can go to eifoundation.org and hit the donate button, information down below. And then, of course, you can donate to the first responders as well, and the information directly to the New York City site, not great. So I put in a shorter one from The Daily Show, who's been talking about how to help as well. So there are plenty of ways to help here in New York City. If you want more, look at last week's. I've got a few of those in there as well. But on to this week. Now this week, I'm going to talk about New York City and my very first trip here. Now, this was inspired by my friend Nicola. You may have seen him in a couple of the videos. He does an online kind of talk. He's done it in both Italian and in English. And yeah, he was talking about why he fell in love with this city and his first trip here. And that sort of was really inspiring for me. Now, my first trip here was in August of 1988. Actually, took a plane in on a night during a heavy rainstorm while the cops were clearing out Tompkins Square Park during that riot. And yeah, my flight was delayed a lot. Now, on my first trip, I was lucky enough to be staying with a friend, so I didn't have to worry about any hotel costs, because that's usually the big thing when you come here. And my friend had an apartment in Hell's Kitchen, just about 2 blocks away from Times Square. So yeah, my first trip through Times Square at about midnight during a rainstorm. Now, I called her to let her know I was going to be late, and this was before cell phones. And she was like, yeah, ring the bell when you get here. Step over the woman who is lying on the stairs. She usually sleeps there after midnight. So, yeah, that was my first introduction to New York City. Now, things have changed a lot since the 80s. Much cleaner, far fewer people sleeping on the stairs of various apartments. But it was an interesting introduction. Now, my first trip, of course, I went to Times Square because, you know, it was right there. I also went to Rockefeller Center, Lincoln Center, Central Park, but I spent most of my time in the Village. Washington Square Park, always been one of my very favorite places. I initially wanted to go to NYU, but my parents didn't have the money and I wasn't getting any scholarships for something like that. So I went to the University of Michigan. But you know, it's an amazing park because there's always so much going on, except for right now. I have seen acrobats, the pigeon guy. You can feed squirrels. The oldest tree in Manhattan is in that park. It has been a graveyard. It was a training ground for people going to the Civil War. It just has so much amazing history in this town. And right now, well, not right now, but in general, it is one of my favorite places for people watching. You can find places that are people who will have telescopes set up on nights where something special is supposed to be happening in the sky. You've got the Washington Square Arch. You've got the fountain. You've got the chessboards, and often there's bands, and there's always a pianist there. It's such an amazing place. It was also the very first place I was, offered marijuana. I refused because, you don't get drugs from strangers, especially not in the 80s in a park. But there's a lot less of that going on right now. And it is a wonderful place. Now, I also went to the East Village. I saw the original CBGBs. I went over to Tompkins Square Park to see what was going on there and what delayed my flight. I had so much amazing food, and I spent a lot of time on St. Mark's Place, which back in the 80s was the place that, all of the punks and the new wavers and the kids hung out, and actually went to both trash and vaudeville, and got myself some t-shirts and things like that. All in all, my first trip to New York City was a memory I will always have, and sometimes even mention on my Vintage Village tour. So if you have a chance to come to New York City when this is all over, sirens, we've had a lot of them. Well, I suggest going to the Village and exploring places that aren't in every guidebook, and getting a guide, because we know those places. That's our job. And the Village is someplace that most every New Yorker has some affection for, especially if you've been here a while. Now, I made my first trip in 1988. I moved out of Michigan in 1994, and I moved to New York City in 1996. And I love it here. You couldn't do a tour guide job without loving it. And it's amazing. It's a place unlike any other. You can find every language, every food, and there are so many experiences here that I am missing horribly, and look forward to getting back out, seeing the places I love and the people I care about. Now, check back in next week if you do have a question, or you would like something answered. Please let me know, and I will. I'll answer what I can. So, thanks for tuning in. See you next week. Thanks.